All right, welcome to your deep dive. We're going to be exploring the Startup Club newsletter from February 6th, 2025. It's packed with some really good stuff.
Yeah, a ton of really practical advice and some great market insights.
Definitely. And it's, all from an entrepreneur's perspective,
Yeah.
so it makes it really relatable. Let's just jump right into it, okay? So first up is the story about Colin Campbell. He almost got kicked out of his own company. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, talk about a nightmare.
Yeah.
Right. But it's such a good example of why systems are so important, especially when you're trying to scale a business.
Yeah.
Colin, I mean, he was obviously a brilliant entrepreneur, but even he hit a wall when things started to grow really quickly.
I think everyone can relate to that.
Yeah, I think so too. And
Yeah.
what's interesting is that he was initially really resistant to implementing any kind of structured system,
Yeah.
like the rhythm systems framework.
Oh, okay.
But eventually he realized that it was like essential.
He was make or break.
Yeah, totally.
And so he made that change, and look what happened. They doubled their revenue, their share price went way up, and they ended up exiting the business right before the 2008 financial crisis hit.
Wow. Talk about good timing, right?
Yeah, can you imagine if they hadn't gotten their act together?
Oh, it would have been a completely different story. I mean, they could have been caught right in the middle of all of that,
Yeah.
and exiting the business would have been, I mean, who knows?
Yeah, a lot harder, for sure. And that brings us to the time to sell index that the newsletter mentions. It's currently sitting at 6.9 out of 100. Not very encouraging if you're thinking about selling your business, right?
No, not at all. It's definitely a buyer's market. So the index analyzes, previous cycles in the IPO market, looking at like those trough to peak periods,
Yep.
just to get a sense of the overall climate.
And with a score that low, I mean, what does that actually tell us?
Basically, buyers have all the leverage,
Right.
which makes it really difficult to get a good deal if you're the seller.
So even though the newsletter mentions that there might be some recovery in IPOs this year, it's still not ideal, right?
No, not ideal at all. I mean, we're not seeing a return to a strong seller's market just yet.
Okay.
Interest rates, are playing a big role in that too. It
Yeah.
influences acquisition costs and smaller businesses. They usually experience a lag before they actually start to benefit from those rising valuations.
Got it. Now, Colin Campbell also shared some interesting thoughts about exiting a business in an interview he did on the Entrepreneurs on Fire podcast.
Oh, yeah, that's a great podcast.
Yeah, definitely. His perspective is really valuable, especially for, like first-time entrepreneurs who might be really emotionally attached to their first venture.
Mhm.
He talked about how important it is to stay in control during the negotiations
Yeah.
and, getting the timing right and even just thinking about entrepreneurship as a kind of a repeatable trade,
Mm.
which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to look at it because a lot of entrepreneurs, they get so caught up in that one business
Yeah,
that they kind of forget that it could be one of many.
right.
And so he's advocating for a more detached, like business-minded approach,
Right.
which,
Yeah.
ultimately can lead to better outcomes in the long run.
For sure, and it's definitely a good way to avoid those common pitfalls, like losing control during negotiations
Well,
or totally misjudging the market.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, let's move on to something a bit more fun. The newsletter also has a list of top 10 movies for entrepreneurs
Oh, cool.
with Colin Campbell's takeaways from each film. So it's kind of like a movie night with a business twist.
I love that.
Me too. And it's really
Yeah.
fascinating to see how he connects these films to entrepreneurial principles.
Yeah. It just goes to show you that inspiration can come from anywhere, right?
Totally. So, for example, he says that The Social Network reminds us that execution is everything.
Mm.
Like, ideas are a dime a dozen, but it's making them happen that actually matters.
Yeah, that's so true. You can have the best idea in the world, but if you don't do anything with it,
Right.
it's
Working.
worthless.
Exactly. And then there's The Greatest Showman, which he says is all about embracing diversity and building a strong community,
Yeah.
which, when you think about it, it's all about building a team.
Yeah, it's about surrounding yourself with people who have different skills and perspectives.
Exactly. And then there's Moneyball, which he says is a lesson in data-driven decision-making.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Especially for entrepreneurs who, tend to rely on their gut feeling.
Yeah,
Sometimes you need to look at the numbers.
for sure. Okay, so let's switch gears now and talk about funding. The newsletter has a whole section on venture capital, and it points out something that kind of surprised me. It says that 75% of VC-backed startups actually fail.
Wow. That's a pretty high failure rate.
I know, right? It kind of makes you rethink that whole, venture capital is the golden ticket kind of thing.
Yeah, it definitely challenges that perception.
Yeah.
And it really underscores the importance of figuring out whether VC is the right fit for your business.
So when is it a good fit?
Well, VCs typically look for companies that can scale really fast.
Right.
And that have strong network effects.
So if your business isn't like that, then...
Then there are other options to consider.
Okay, like what?
Well, the newsletter mentions things like angel investors, bootstrapping, even leveraging customer revenue to fuel your growth.
So it's really about knowing what you need and carefully considering all the different options.
Exactly, especially in the current economic climate.
Right.
With interest rates fluctuating and the IPO market still recovering, it's more important than ever to be strategic about funding.
For sure. It's definitely a lot to think about.
It is, but it's all part of the journey, right?
Yeah, totally. It's kind of interesting how Colin Campbell's story, it kind of ties into this whole conversation about funding, Like he bootstrapped his first company, and then later when he needed capital to scale, he was super strategic about choosing investors who were like aligned with his vision,
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is so important.
It is. He actually talks about how important it was for him to keep control of his company, even when he was taking on outside investment.
Right.
Which can be tricky.
Yeah.
It's a delicate balance.
Right.
But it's essential if you want to stay true to those original goals. Yeah.
Totally. And it sounds like he was also really selective about the type of funding that he went after. It wasn't just about getting the most money. It was about finding partners who really understood his long-term vision.
Exactly. And that's something that this newsletter really drives home, that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to funding. What works for one startup might be a total disaster for another.
Right, right. Thinking about this whole newsletter, it really feels like a roadmap for entrepreneurs,
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's not just telling you what to do. It's like giving you the tools and the mindset that you need to actually navigate all the challenges that come with building and scaling a business.
I agree. It's incredibly comprehensive. It covers so many different topics, from the nitty-gritty of systems implementation to those bigger picture things like exiting and funding.
Yeah.
And it does it in a way that's both informative and engaging.
Totally. And I think what makes it so relatable is that personal touch that Colin Campbell brings to it,
Oh, absolutely.
Sharing his own experiences, both the good and the bad. It just makes the advice feel more real.
Yeah, it's one thing to read about business principles in a textbook, but it's a whole other thing to hear it from someone who's actually been there and done that.
Right. And it's not just about learning from his successes either. He's also really open about the mistakes that he's made, which is so valuable.
It humanizes the whole entrepreneurial journey.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that it's okay to stumble.
Yeah.
To mess up, as long as you learn from it and keep moving forward.
For sure. For sure. One thing that really stuck with me from this newsletter is the importance of adaptability. Whether it's, Colin Campbell changing his approach after almost getting kicked out of his own company, or the advice on navigating a volatile market when you're thinking about exiting, it all comes down to being flexible and responsive to change,
Yeah, it's such a crucial skill for any entrepreneur, especially in today's world where things are constantly changing.
Yeah, if you can't adapt, you're going to get left behind.
Exactly.
And I think that's a big part of what makes this newsletter so valuable. It doesn't just give you a snapshot of the current landscape. It gives you the tools and the mindset to actually thrive in an environment that's constantly in flux.
It encourages you to be curious, to experiment, and to be committed to lifelong learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are the qualities that really set successful entrepreneurs apart.
Right. And speaking of continuous learning, I love how this newsletter even finds inspiration in the most unexpected places, like movies.
Yeah, it is pretty cool.
Right.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that valuable lessons are everywhere if you just keep your eyes open.
Yeah, totally. So, for example, Colin talks about how The Social Network highlighted the importance of execution, just having a great idea isn't enough. You got to bring it to life.
Right.
And that takes, focus, determination, all of that.
A lot of hustle.
Yeah. And then there's The Greatest Showman, which he connects to the power of building a really strong team
Yeah.
and embracing diversity. You know, that film really emphasizes how important it is to surround yourself with talented people who bring different, perspectives and skills to the table.
For sure.
And then, of course, there's Moneyball, which for Colin was all about using data to make smart decisions.
Which is a great lesson for any business, really.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Not just baseball.
Yeah. It's about going beyond those gut feelings.
Yeah.
And using data to actually guide your strategy.
Yeah, to help you identify opportunities, mitigate risks.
So these movies, they might seem like, just entertainment, but they actually offer some pretty profound insights into the world of business and entrepreneurship.
They do, and they also make the learning process a lot more fun.
Right.
It's a reminder that, education doesn't have to be boring.
Totally.
You can learn valuable lessons from pretty much anywhere.
As long as you're open to it.
Exactly.
Man, we really have uncovered so much from this Startup Club newsletter.
Yeah, it's like Entrepreneurship 101 all packed into one really fun package.
I keep thinking back to Colin's story and how he turned the whole company around just by implementing those systems.
Right.
It just shows you that sometimes the biggest changes, well, they come from the smallest things.
It's not always about, reinventing the wheel. Sometimes it's just about those little adjustments that can have like a ripple effect through your entire organization.
And that ties back into something else we were talking about, like adaptability.
Oh, for sure.
Colin had to adapt when his company was like going through that rough patch. And then he had to adapt again when he was trying to figure out how to, exit the business.
It never ends, does it?
I guess not.
It's like a constant, dance,
Yeah, you got to be able to move with the music.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the things you'd want our listener to really take away?
Well, I think the biggest thing is execution. Like Colin said, ideas are cheap.
Right. What
matters is making them happen.
Yeah, taking action.
And to do that effectively, you need systems. Think back to Colin's experience with that. The rhythm systems framework, that was a game changer for him.
Absolutely. And I think it's also super important to have a clear exit strategy.
Yeah, even if you're just starting out, you got to think about the end game.
Right. And timing is everything.
It is. Remember the time to sell index.
Oh, yeah.
That was pretty clear about that.
For sure. For sure. And, I think Colin's advice about viewing entrepreneurship as a repeatable trade, that was a really powerful mindset shift.
It is. It helps you detach emotionally from the business and focus on maximizing your return.
So it's not just about, building something you love. It's about building something that you can eventually, move on from.
Exactly.
Okay. And lastly, I think we got to emphasize the importance of continuous learning.
Oh, yeah.
This newsletter was great, had a ton of valuable insights, but it's just the beginning.
Totally. The best entrepreneurs are always learning, always growing.
They're like sponges, soaking up everything they can.
Exactly. They're looking for new knowledge, new perspectives, new ways to improve their game.
And they find inspiration from, all kinds of places, like those movies we talked about.
Yeah.
Who knew you could learn so much from The Social Network and The Greatest Showman?
I know. It's pretty amazing.
So to wrap this all up, think about what you can do today, right now, inspired by, everything we talked about, to move your own entrepreneurial journey forward.
Yeah, maybe it's, implementing a new system. Or finally putting together that exit strategy. Or even just watching one of those movies again with, a fresh perspective.
Whatever it is, take action. Use the insights from this newsletter and let them be your guide on your path to, entrepreneurial success.
Absolutely. You got this.
And that's a wrap for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.